Yes, dear students. So let's have first a quick recap of the previous sessions that we have covered. The narrator of the story, he took the adventurous task of going round the world voyage, just like Captain James Cook, who had taken such a step 200 years ago, right? So we see that how the narrator, he was very fond of adventures, and the family had spent 16 years in improving their skills on the sea. They had also built the boat professionally and they named it Wave Walker. So finally, they set their sail in the month of July in the year 1976. The first part of the journey, it was covered peacefully. They sailed smoothly throughout the year and they reached Cape Town. The narrator, he took two crewmen, Larry Vigil and Herb Sigler, as he was about to enter the world's roughest sea, that is the Southern Indian Ocean. They started their journey from Cape Town, and then after 2 days, they started facing strong wind. Along with that, they also started facing huge waves. The narrator took precautionary measures on seeing the huge waves. Along with that, they celebrated New Year and the Christmas Eve and the New Year as well. And the impending disaster, it came on January 2nd in the evening. A huge wave hits the boat Wave Walker, and the boat was badly damaged. The crew members were also injured. The narrator was badly injured. His teeth were broken, ribs were broken, his mouth was filled with blood. But still, he managed to have the courage and kept on steering the wheel. He knew somewhere that there was leakage and the boat was filled with water. He found that Larry and Herb, they were continuously pumping out the water. His wife came out of the cabin and he handed over the wheel and he went in to check the cabin. There he found that everything was badly damaged. And he went to children's room. There he inquired from them. They said that they were all right. Sue had hit her head with something and it was swollen, but she did not worry her father with the other injuries. We find that she was quite full of confidence. She took care that she should not upset her father, and she exhibited extraordinary courage during the encounter with the stormy waves. The narrator, he did the necessary repairs that was required, but still more problems came. The water was filling in the ship alarmingly, and it was very important that it should be removed from the ship. But the hand pumps were getting blocked with the debris that was floating. The electric pump had short circuited. Luckily, the narrator, he found a spare pump which was in the chart room, and then they started pumping out the water again. The whole evening and night went on steering the wheel, making distress calls, mayday calls, and this way pumping out the water, and the night went on. Sue also told her father after that how she had other injuries as well. There was a deep cut on her arm. And when her father inquired from her, why didn't she tell him earlier? She said that she did not want to worry him when he was busy saving them all. So by morning of January 3rd, the pumps had the water levels sufficiently under control for them, and they were taking rest in rotation. So let me read from here again because of the disturbance network problem. We were not able to cover the chapter properly. So the narrator said that we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline, and on checking, I found that nearly all the boat's main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. Keel refers to the bottom of the ship. He knew somewhere there was still a great leakage there, and because of that, water was getting inside the ship. And it was because the main structure of the ship was badly damaged up to the bottom of the ship as there. And there was nothing holding up the whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. So it was because of the cupboard partitions, the ship was still holding up. Otherwise, it would have broken badly. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but wave walker wouldn't hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. The narrator also observed that because of those partitions, the cupboard partitions, the wave walker was properly intact, and it was badly damaged. So the boat would not make up to Australia because ये जो वेदर कंडीशंस थे, अगर ये इसी तरह चलते रहे तो शिप वुड नॉट होल्ड टुगेदर लॉन्ग इनफ. जो ढांचा था वो बहुत ज्यादा देर तक टिक नहीं पाता उन ह्यूज वेव्स के सामने. They were able to survive for long 15 hours. And then the narrator says, I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands in a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them, Ile Amsterdam, was a French scientific base. So he checked the charts, and from there he calculated that he came to know that there were two islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. And the nearest one was the Ile Amsterdam, and it was a French scientific base. And it was the only hope that they had. So our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean. Pinpricks means because जैसे आप एक पिन से होल करते हो, so in that vast ocean, these islands were like pinprick because they were very small in size, and they were looking for these islands there. But the narrator says, unless the wind and seas abated so we could hoist sail, our chances would be slim indeed. Abated means to reduce in intensity. कहते हैं कि जब तक विंड और ये जो वेव्स हैं, इनका जो इंटेंसिटी है वो कम नहीं हो जाती, विंड की स्पीड कम नहीं हो जाती, और जो वेव्स हैं उनकी जो ऊंचाई है वो नॉर्मल नहीं हो जाती, कम नहीं हो जाती, एंड वी कुड हॉइस्ट अ सेल, और वो एक सेल को सेट ना कर लेते, तब तक चांसेस बहुत स्लिम थे. And the great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. Auxiliary engine means the supporting engine that was there, it was also out of order. It had stopped working. So it was important that they hoisted the sail to get proper speed. But as the wind was quite blowing with a great speed and the huge waves were still there, they could not hoist the sail. And that's why this narrator says that chances would be slim indeed. And this way, January came, January 4th. And after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. So they were continuously pumping out the water. Long 36 hours passed, and now they were left with only a few centimeters of water. So he says, we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. So they had to pump out the water only that was coming inside, so they could take rest also for long hours in between. But still there were problems. He says, we could not set any sail on the main mast. Pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. मेन मास्ट पर सेल क्यों नहीं चढ़ा पा रहे थे? बिकॉज जो प्रेशर क्रिएट होता ऑन द रोप्स, इट कुड हैव एक्चुअली टॉर्न द हल पार्ट ऑफ द शिप अपार्ट. शिप टुकड़ों में टूट सकता था, एंड दैट्स व्हाई दे जस्ट अगेन हॉइस्टेड द स्टॉर्म जिप. जो छोटी सेल है वापस उसके सहारे दे स्टार्टेड मूविंग अहेड टुवर्ड्स द टू आइलैंड्स दैट दे वर लुकिंग फॉर. Mary found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. Everything was destroyed. Water was inside the cabins as well. Food was also destroyed. And somehow Mary, wife of the narrator, she managed to find something to eat, and it was corned beef and cracker biscuits. And they had their first meal in 2 days. But the narrator says our respite was short-lived. ये जो intervals पे rest ले रहे थे, they were relaxed a little bit. It was only for a short while. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. And within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots and the seas were getting higher. Situation again became worse after 4 p.m. And the weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5, our situation was again desperate. So they kept on struggling throughout the night, and by the morning of January 5, they were in a hopeless state, desperate situation. जहाँ वो सारी उम्मीद खो चुके थे. When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, Daddy, are we going to die? So John, son of the narrator, when he went to comfort the children, just to console them that everything would be all right, his son asked him, were they going to die? I tried to assure them that he would make it. Narrator wanted to assure them that everything would be all right. They would make it up to Australia. And then the son said, But Daddy, we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together. You and Mummy, Sue and I. See the courage, the extraordinary courage that Jonathan had showed here. He exhibited this courage and it actually motivated the narrator. He was surprised to listen to these words said by his son. The optimism that he showed, it actually made him more determined. And the narrator says, I could find no words with which to respond. But I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. So after listening to the words of his son, he was determined to fight the sea, to face the problem with all the experience that he had and whatever he had on the ship. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. So he decided to turn the ship, toss the ship, turn it to the other side because already the starboard side was damaged, it was weakened. So he decided to turn it and facing, he decided that the ship would now turn the other side and the waves would now be facing the hull side. So he also used an improvised sea anchor, which he made with the help of the 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin oil. And taking two barrels, he tied them with a heavy nylon rope and he prepared a heavy anchor. Anchor is important to control the speed of the ship. It helps when you are using the sail and you're facing such huge waves and wind speed. Anchor is quite important at that time. So he prepared that to control the ship. That evening, Mary and I sat together, holding hands as the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt the end was very near. Although the narrator, he showed courage, he faced the problem very bravely, but still somewhere he became pessimistic. He was losing hope. And see the difference of the behavior in the adults and the children. Somewhere now the adults, they were in a desperate state, but the children, they showed extraordinary courage and optimism. The son was not afraid of dying. The little girl, Susan, she did not tell about her injury to her father. And it was that evening of January 5 when the narrator and his wife, they both sat together. They were in a desperate situation and were just waiting for their end. It seemed as if they have lost all their hopes because more and more water was getting into the ship through the broken parts of the ship. And that's why the narrator said, we both felt the end was very near. But Wave Walker rode us out the storm, and by the morning of January 6, with the wind easing, I tried to get a reading on the sextant. So, sextant, it is an instrument which is used to measure the angles and the distances. And when on January 6th, the narrator found that Wave Walker successfully rode out of the storm and wind has also started to ease down. Wind की speed कम हो चुकी थी, जो huge waves थी वो भी अब उतनी huge नहीं थी. He decided to checked the direction where they were heading, where were they at that moment, and he started taking reading on this instrument named as sextant. Back in the chat room, I worked on wind speeds, changes of course, drift, and current in an effort to calculate our position. Now, in earlier days, when there were no such instrument, people used to check the direction with the help of different things like looking at the star, their direction, looking at the direction of the wind, the current flowing there. So that way, they used to understand their situation and the position. The narrator also applied that technique. And he says the best I could determine what was that we were somewhere in 1,50,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. So उन्होंने अपनी उस डिस्टेंस को नापा कि वो कहाँ थे, और उनको पता चला कि समवेयर वो 1,50,000 किलोमीटर्स ओशन में कहीं पर हैं, and they were looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. So while I was thinking, Sue moving painfully joined me. We have already read that how badly she was injured. So she came to her father. She was in great pain. The left side of her head was now very swollen and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. Thin strips होती है ना, बिल्कुल उस तरह से उसकी आंखें हो गई थी, because आंखें भी सूज गई थी. Head was already swollen. And again we see that how she came with a card. She gave me a card she had made. See the optimism the girl had shown in this situation where everybody was tensed, worried, working on protecting the ship from sinking. This girl, she showed optimism and courage, and she prepared a card for her father. On the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh?" I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message, "Oh, how I love you both." So this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. So she prepared a card and she made funny faces with funny expression on the card, and those faces were of Mary and her father. So she also wrote that these are funny people and did they make you laugh? She also wrote that how much she loved them, and she gave them the courage and optimism by writing, "Let's hope for the best." Somehow we had to make it. The narrator, he was so motivated and inspired. He was overwhelmed seeing the gesture of his own daughter. And he decided that somehow now they had to make it. They had to reach to the island that is LA Amsterdam. And he redoubled his efforts. He said, "I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variation." So he said that he checked his calculation, he rechecked it. They had lost their main compass and they had a spare one, but it was not giving correct reading. So he says, despite all handicaps, he says, I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. बहुत सारे instruments काम नहीं कर रहे थे, but still he tried to get reading from that compass which was not corrected for the magnetic variation. Despite all handicaps, taking help of the westerly currents that was flowing through that part of the Indian Ocean, looking at the wind direction, the drifts and everything, he made a calculation. About 2 p.m., I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees. So he went and he instructed Larry about the direction to which he had to move, and it was a course of 185 degrees. He added, if we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel, he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. And he told this to Larry, although with conviction, because he needed to convince Larry that they would surely reach, but he himself was not convinced at that moment. But still, they were hoping for the best. And thus he said that if they were lucky, they would definitely reach the island by about 5 p.m. Then with a heavy heart, I went below. climbed on my bunk and amazingly dozed off. So he was feeling really bad that he could not do much to save the crew members. So he went there. He climbed on his bunk, means uska jo cabin tha, jahan uska bed tha. He went there and he said that it was quite amazing that he fell asleep. Use neend aa gayi. When I woke up, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. So he woke up at 6. It was already getting dark now. I knew we must have missed the island, and with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. So he was sure that they had missed the island because the sail that they had was just a storm jib. छोटी sail थी उनके पास, and वो जो westerly wind थी, उनका ship इतना powerful भी नहीं था, इस condition में ही नहीं था कि वो उस winds को झेल पाता. So the narrator, he thought that they have missed the island. At that moment, a tussled head appeared by my bunk. Can I have a hug? Jonathan asked. Sue was right behind him. Now, चूंकि जो नरेटर थे वो अभी सोकर उठे ही थे, आंखें खोली ही थी उन्होंने. So he saw two objects appearing towards him. आंखें जो थी वो धुंधली धुंधली उनको दिख रही थी, कुछ objects थे. So a kind of disordered way में कुछ appearance उसे आती दिखाई दी अपनी तरफ. And he saw that it was his children, and Jonathan was asking for a hug. And he asked, why am I getting a hug now? Because you are the best daddy in the whole world and the best captain, my son replied. Jonathan said that he was the best father and the best captain in the world. The narrator said, not today, John, I am afraid. The narrator was sure that they had missed the island, so he did not deserve that hug and the praise that he was the best daddy and best captain. So he said, not today, John. Why? You must be, said Sue in a matter-of-fact voice. You found the island. Sue was quite cheerful, and in a cheerful and casual tone, she said to her father that, why are you talking like that? You found the island. What? I shouted. The narrator was actually shocked, and they both the children, that is Jonathan and Susan, they chorused. तो उन्होंने एक साथ कहा, it is out there in front of us as big as a battleship. दोनों ने एक साथ अपने पिता को बताया कि हमारे शिप के बिल्कुल सामने वो आइलैंड है, and it is just as big as a battleship. बैटलशिप वो होती हैं जो बैटल्स के दौरान यूज की जाती हैं, जिसमें बहुत सारे एयरक्राफ्ट्स होते हैं जो वॉर में यूज होते हैं. सो वो वाली बैटलशिप जो काफी ह्यूज होती है साइज में. And they both chorused together. They said to their father together this thing, that the island was just in front of them. I rushed back on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Ile Amsterdam. So when he reached the deck, he rushed towards it, and he saw with great relief the clear outline of the Ile Amsterdam. The shore that was there, the rocky appearance of that island that was there, it was right in front of him, and he took a sigh of relief. It was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock. Well, bleak here refers to dull, cheerless piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, the most beautiful island in the world. But ये जो island था, ये narrator के लिए सबसे beautiful island था. Why? Because it was because of this island that they were able to save themselves. So अगर ये island ही नहीं होता तो it would not have been possible for them to survive, because this wave walker was not in a condition to travel such long distance reaching Australia. So finally they were at Ile Amsterdam. We anchored offshore for the night, and the next morning all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. So they decided to anchor, means just be there in the boat, wave walker, that night, and next morning all the inhabitants, means जो 28 लोग उस island में रह रहे थे, they all came to welcome all the crew members of the ship, and they helped us ashore, means उन्होंने land करने में मदद की. So with land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie. So when when he touched the ground, his mind was filled with the thoughts. He was continuously thinking about Larry and Herbie, who cheerful and optimistic under the direst stress. So they were doing their duty in a cheerful manner and with full optimism under this direst stress. Direst stress कहते हैं extreme level of stress. The situation where they were total desperate. In that situation also, Larry and Herb, they kept on doing their duty. Then he thought of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Mary also supported her husband in all possible way. She kept on steering the wheel when narrator was busy in making repairs, making calculations, and uh, saving them all. And then he says, most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry. So he thought of his daughter, who showed courage and bravery by not telling it about her injury. She was badly injured, and that's why the narrator said that, which subsequently took 6 minor operations to remove a recurring blood clot between the skin and the skull. Injury was quite deep, and there was a blood clotting also there in her head. So she had to undergo 6 minor operations. And then he thought of his son, 6-year-old son, Jonathan, who was not afraid to die. So we see that how the courage and bravery was shown by every member who were there in the ship. And we see that how the title also comes from the words spoken by Jonathan, that we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together. And if we look at the story, the title is quite suggestive as it brings out the spirit of courage and bravery of the crew members, the captain's family. We see that how the children, they were optimistic, they were courageous, and they show extraordinary bravery during the times of direst stress. They did not discourage others by creating panic in that situation, and they supported them. So we see that how this story, it brings home the idea that if we are determined, if we are hopeful, if we are all together, we can overcome any kind of situation in our life. If we have the support of our family and friends, we can overcome all kind of odds on the way to success. Next is about being determined in life, not losing hope, being optimistic in life. These are very important virtues that one must have. We see that how the captain, he continued to struggle till the ship, it landed safely at Amsterdam. So he did not give up. At a moment, we find him that he started losing hope, but then he gathered his courage and he started making all the efforts to save all the members, save the ship as well. Another theme of the story is that the human instinct for survival, it works even in the most desperate situation. It keeps us actually moving forward in life, not giving up in life. When the captain, he was thrown overboard, he fell into the sea. For a moment, he just gave up. Everything seemed to him that he was losing consciousness. Everything was just coming to an end. But then suddenly, when his head popped up, he struggled hard to get onto the ship again. He started struggling. The survival instinct made him reach the ship again. And the courage that was shown by Larry and Herb, how they showed rare courage and they worked hard to save the ship. So when we work together, we can overcome all kinds of odds in life. And this is what is the theme of the chapter. We are not afraid to die if we can all be together. I hope the chapter is clear to you all. Tomorrow we will discuss the questions of the chapter. Thank you all.